Today, I'm going to stay with what's the hard part of writing? What's the hard part of writing? I asked my listeners and viewers. I got some great responses, including this one from Lori on YouTube, who wrote simply, "The hard part of writing for me is getting to my desk and actually writing." And when I read this, I immediately thought of a poem by Archibald MacLeish that I read when I was a young man, 21 years old, and I read The End of the World. I found it in this collection of poems, The End of the World by Archibald MacLeish, and I was fascinated by it. It's just a two-stanza poem. The first stanza describes this sort of funky circus setting, and then that stanza, so he depicts that setting, and then he writes, quite unexpectedly, the top blew off. So boom, the big bang. And then he writes, and there overhead, there hung over those thousands of white faces, those dazed eyes, there in the starless dark, the poise, the hover, there with vast wings across the canceled skies, there in the sudden blackness, the black pall of nothing, 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 nothing at all. Woo! Man, I loved that when I was 21, 22. I'd grown up, you see, in the 70s and 80s. And the big one, the bomb, I lived sort of hovering under the shadow of that, of nuclear annihilation. Nothing, 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 nothing at all. That's what would be left, it seemed to me, when that happened. And in fact, I remember in his Nobel address, Faulkner felt, and this was in the late 50s, that writers had only one question in their mind anymore, and that was, when would I be blown up? Okay. But I think of that poem sometimes when I talk to my fearless writing students, and I talk about failure, and I say, what is failure in your mind? When you picture failure, what do you picture? And it's always the same thing. Nothing. Just nothing. You failed, and it's just nothing. It's a kind of annihilation. Yeah, it's true. Interesting, isn't it? So what does this have to do with just actually getting to the page and writing? What did she say? What did Lori say? She said, just getting to the desk and actually writing. Yeah. What does that? Well, when you get to the desk and you go there first, what you're probably going to be greeted with is nothing. Because probably when you start, you aren't connected to the story yet. You aren't yet, your attention hasn't descended to the level where the story is. It's maybe still caught up in the outside world around you. You're still thinking about the world that you live in, as opposed to the world you're going to write about. They're slightly different things. And so you begin with nothing. And you know, as I've said in this podcast before, when I sit down to write, I write 2 essays a week still, brand new essays a week. And my first thought is, I got nothing, meaning I don't have an idea yet that I'm interested in. And that moment, think about it, that moment of creative nothingness. In other words, you sit down to be creative, and yet you feel like you have nothing. That feeling seems to emulate what failure will look like. Nothing. And so it's like instant failure. Emotionally, it all happens very fast. And I think a lot of writers, and I can't say this is true for Lori specifically, but I think a lot of writers don't get to the desk because they fear that nothingness. They don't want to experience that nothingness, that failure, that immediate failure. I got nothing. I am nothing. But here's the thing. There's no such thing as nothing. It doesn't actually exist in that sense, creative nothing. And I have learned that sitting there and waiting for an idea to come is the best antidote to fear of failure. Because eventually, as I sit there and I get interested, as I sit there, something comes. There's always something in me. I just haven't found it. There's always an idea that's wanting to express. I just haven't heard it. But you have to trust. You have to believe it's there. You may not see it yet, but you have to believe it's there. If you doubt it will come, it won't for as long as you doubt. And the door will remain closed. But if you sit there and you say, I have nothing, and you say, no, I do have something. I have a desire. I have the desire to write. I do have that. That's not nothing. And I have interest. That's something. That's not nothing. And I have curiosity. That's something. That's not nothing. and interest and desire. And I have imagination. I know I can picture many things that aren't here. I have curiosity. That's not nothing. I have imagination. That's not nothing. And if I can tune into what I'm actually curious about, and that's, by the way, a question only I can answer. If I can tune into something I'm actually curious about in this moment, then something will come out of the emptiness, out of the supposed emptiness, out of that nothing, nothing, nothing at all. Something comes because you always have something. You always have your imagination. You always have your desire. You always have your curiosity. And as long as you have those, you've got all you need. Yeah. So what's the hard part? What's the hard part? I want to hear from you. I do. Oh, these are the best podcasts when I can answer these questions. Very inspiring to me. So let me know what the hard part is. And if you just like listening, you don't want to participate on that level, just subscribe. Hit subscribe. That way you won't miss a dose. Of course, if you like it, say so. We'd love to hear from you. So till next week, this is Bill Kenower. Stay fearless.